This Week in Connecticut with Dennis House starts now.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Dennis House. Straight ahead today, my conversation with Governor Ned Lamont. I sat down with him in his office at the state capitol to talk about what's on his mind these days, the economy, and his political future. Plus, remembering a giant in Connecticut television, we'll look back at the life and legacy of Mark Davis. Also, I'm joined by Rich Cohen, the author of a new book about Jennifer Farber-Dulos. But first, the lead. The election of 2026 is less than a year and a half away. Republicans are lining up. In fact, a new name in the race for governor. More on that in just a moment. But the big question is, what will Governor Lamont do? Will he run for re-election? We had a long chat in his office. And Governor Lamont, thank you so much for meeting with us here today.
Good to see you, Dennis.
So how does it feel? You're in the summer mode now. The session's over. In your judgment, the biggest accomplishment from the session?
The early childhood education, by far the biggest thing I think I've done since being in this job. You know, we got a $250 million down payment. We'll have universal early childhood pre-K, free of charge to all families up to $100,000. This will take us a few years to get there. I know what that means for the kids. Every teacher tells me it makes an enormous difference when that kid comes for a really good pre-K. I think it's a program that makes a difference, helps people get back to work, affordability, because that's so expensive for a young family, childcare.
Housing is so big. You were in New Haven this week to unveil two 16-story towers for housing, yet the housing bill was vetoed. What do you want to see in the next housing bill?
So the good news is we have more building permits and housing going on now than in many a year. So that's a good thing. People want to be in Connecticut. You pointed out the big project we got right next to Union Station in New Haven, hundreds of units there. My concern with the housing bill is I need some buy-in from mayors and first selectmen and local planning and zoning. We just can't impose this on people. I want towns to take the lead. Most of them are, some of them aren't, and we're going to work together to make sure we get that done. Probably get it passed in the special session. Housing is that urgent, we're going to get it done.
With the Trump tariffs, is there any opportunity to create some more manufacturing here in this state for some products that, or items that perhaps are made in foreign countries?
I think so. I mean, Dan O'Keefe has a program right now for those companies that want to relocate here. We give them some tariff-related incentives, you know, up to, $5–10 million. I just came back from the air show in Paris. You know, a lot of companies in the aerospace supply chain thinking about getting closer back to Connecticut. I talked to about 20 of them, and so did Dan.
I want to talk about your political future because you said that you'd be making a decision sometime after the session. And just about every Democrat I have spoken with has said that you should run for a third term. You said you wanted to sit down with Lieutenant Governor Bisewicz and Annie and get their opinions on it. Where does it stand right now? What kind of advice are you getting from them?
I think they're feeling pretty positive about going. We've got good momentum in the state. We've come a long way over the last 7 or 8 years. Back then, we couldn't get our fiscal house in order. And I think we have a lot of unfinished business, starting with getting that universal pre-K for everybody. But, the only reason I'm hesitant is because I just don't like all the politics ingesting into everything we're trying to do. But I got to make up my mind pretty soon.
Why do you have to make it up soon? Is that for the other candidates who might jump in if you don't? Because you really have the luxury of being able to wait, right?
Yeah, there's some truth to that, too. I mean, in my heart of hearts, I think campaigns go on too long. I find them exhausting. I like to govern. By the same token, the ambiguity out there, a lot of people knocking on the door, what's he going to do? So I think I should be clear sooner rather than later.
When do you expect a decision to be made?
I don't know. I'll let you know first. Okay. How's that?
And what would a third Lamont term look like? What is your vision, things you'd like to accomplish?
I want to take 15, 20 minutes off your commute in each direction. We've got great cities. I want to see them continue to grow. They were shrinking for 40 years. Now they're growing. I want to make sure that universal pre-K happens and give every single kid the very best opportunity in life. And something I'm working on with Thea is Youth Service Corps. So those kids, get them a little more options, maybe during the summer, internships, apprentice programs, get them going.
I want to talk a little bit about President Trump because so many prominent Democrats are out there creating resistance against him and criticizing him, and you've sort of taken the middle of the road approach. I mean, he is the president. He's going to be the president for the next couple of years. If you were to sit down with him, do you think you could reach any common ground that would benefit Connecticut?
I think so. I mean, if I sit down, I'd say, Mr. President, we're working with you when it comes to getting criminals off the street, but why do you want to, scare our kids who are Hispanic and go into local schools? I don't think Ronald Reagan called them dreamers. Why are we calling them criminals? Mr. President, energy costs are very high in New England and the state of Connecticut. It's a real Achilles heel for us. Maybe there's something we can work on there. Obviously, you like coal, I like wind, but let's find the places where we can agree.
Do you think that the mayors of the sanctuary cities in Connecticut should rein it in a little bit?
I'll tell you what I've been doing. I don't want our guys to stop doing what they're doing, but Mariana, who was our DEI officer, is now our opportunity officer. You want to know why? Because the Trump administration is doing AI search of all keywords. DEI is one of them. You know, why put yourself right in the target? But I don't want to change who we are and what we're doing.
A few business leaders, including the mayor of Hartford, have asked me to ask you, they want to see the state workers brought back to the office on a regular basis. Some of them only come in once a week now. Do you think that makes sense?
No, I don't think it makes sense. As you maybe remember, I said, let's do at least 2 or 3 days a week, negotiate, with your manager, figure out what works. They took me to arbitration, I lost. So look, we're right now negotiating the next contract. AFSCME says let's put that on the table as something we discuss. So we'll have to discuss it within the confines of that contract negotiation. I think it's much better when people are back in the office, and frankly, so do the restaurants.
I like to ask leaders how they wind down, how they chill out when they're not working to sort of get away from the stress of being who they are. What do you do to sort of just get away from it all?
Well, at the end of the day here, I get home, I take a long walk, short walk through Elizabeth Park, or maybe something a little more exciting, Dyke Pond or the West Hartford Reservoir. We ought to do that sometime. I love that. Then I get back, I probably have a couple of phone calls. I go to bed early and I wake up really early.
That's as most business leaders like to do. You mentioned Elizabeth Park, and there have been a lot of bear sightings, right? Right near the governor's mansion, the governor's property. We've had them in our yard, right outside the window. There's been talk about a bear hunt. Where does Governor Lamont stand on that?
I think it makes sense. I don't know why we want to wait for a tragedy to happen. I think a legislature considered a very responsible bill. On a selective basis, we can decide where it might be appropriate to have a bear hunt. I'll tell you a funny story about a bear in Elizabeth Park. You can edit this if you want, but I'm walking around Elizabeth Park, and all of a sudden there are 30 people looking at the woods, and they say, "Governor, there's a bear there. Do something." I said, "What do you want me to do?" So I called Katie Dykes and go, "Katie, there's a bear in Elizabeth Park." She said, "I know. What do you want me to do?" So, but they came and got that bear taken to a safer place.
Good enough. All right. And Governor, I think we're celebrating about almost 20 years of interviews. I think I first interviewed you in 2005 when you were running for the Senate against Joe Lieberman. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your younger self in 2005?
I just spoke at the Trinity graduation. I'll tell you what I told them, that as I campaign, I often go to senior centers and the such, because older folks are much more likely to vote. And I say, what are your greatest prides and what are your greatest regrets? The greatest pride is always the family and the friends they met, and maybe a little bit about some of their business success, not as much. Their greatest regret, Dennis, was always, and this is what I told the students, not the things they tried to do and failed, but the things they didn't try to do. They didn't think it was the right time, didn't think they could do it. So as I look back in time, I'm really glad I started the business when I did, probably a little earlier. I'm, proud I stood up. I opposed that war in Iraq. I think a lot of people think it was a lousy idea today.
Well, you're here today. Governor Lamont, we thank you so much for your time today, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks for being with us. Another potential candidate for governor when we come back.